So here is the instructions here for the transmission assembly removal. You got to remove the engine sprocket. Of course, that's that. I don't even remember how big that nut is, but you'll remove that nut, and then the gear position switch, which they show right there. And then if you look over here on the actual engine itself, there's where your sprocket usually sits on there. And then the gear position sensor is tucked back in there. You could use a right angle screwdriver to kind of get back in the corner. So there we go. Those are the first two steps. So after you get the shift position sensor removed, you have to remove this O-ring, this collar here. What I ended up doing was I just used, I tried to pull on it with, just a channel locks. I wasn't having any luck with it, so I just used, little vice grips here. Grabbed a hold of it as lightly as I could, and then just kind of tapped it from the back with a hammer. And then it also says that you need to remove a little O-ring, which was located right on there. The next step is to remove the clutch assembly, and that'll be coming up next. First step obviously is going to take off the clutch cover itself. There's a couple bolts, whatever. Just be careful with the gasket as you're taking it off. I've reused the gasket. I don't even know. I've never bought a clutch cover gasket, I don't believe. Just be a little careful when you take it off. They can be reused. And another thing, if you're doing the clutches, a lot of people say, oh, you got to drain the oil, this or that. I would wait to drain the oil until you actually get the clutch out. Make sure you don't drop anything in that oil pan, then you're just kind of SOL, and then if any fiber material falls in too, it'll get caught by the oil, and then hopefully it gets drained out when you drain the oil. Otherwise, some of that stuff could sit in there with your next when you put some fresh oil. And as you can see too here, there's the oil sight glass right there, and you can kind of see that sits right about a little bit below where the opening here is for the clutch cover. So if you have the bike tipped over on the kickstand, no oil is going to drop out of it. So no worries there. So again, take that off, and then there is the hub. I don't have one of those handy, but you just take the 6 screws out. I do it by hand. A lot of people I've seen do it with an impact or a little handheld guy. I just kind of loosen them up just a little bit, alternating, just to be sure I don't warp or do anything like that. Probably a little bit overcautious, but that's what I do. So you take those 6 nuts off, 6 bolts, and then pull the assembly off. And then once you're going to want to do Brock's trick, you don't need any special tool. You just use a cloth, put the cloth on the fiber itself, hold it in there, and then take an impact. I got a nice Milwaukee, and it busted it right out of there. And then there is the slipper assembly. If you want to keep that, if you're doing a clutch mount or whatever you want to do, you can take that out here. And if you keep them together, you can keep them together like that, and then just throw a zip tie around them. If you ever want to throw them back in, then you don't got to guess the order on which way they go. So let's pull this assembly off, and then So once you get the clutch nut loose there, you can take the whole kind of basket out there, and then the hub assembly, and then you can take the clutch basket out. Then this is what it looks like next. And then of course your next step here is to remove the shift shaft assembly. And then since I'm selling this transmission, I am not going to be pulling the transmission assembly apart, so I'll leave that all together. So then the next step here is the shift shaft assembly. So I will show you that in a second. So of course there's always extra steps. So then actually the next step to remove that shift shaft is to remove the oil drive gear removal installation here. Again, I don't know if these are really necessary. I'm just following the exact steps here, as this is my first time pulling it out. But then you got to remove the clutch, and then there's a guide bolt over there. And then pull out the guide, and then pull out the oil pump drive gear bolt. And then here it does say the oil pump drive gear bolt is left-handed thread, so be careful when you do that. And then you'll pull out the drive gear itself, and then the sprocket, and then the chain, and then you should be able to go on to the next step. So once I kind of get that cranked apart here, It looks like here's the bolt, here's the guide, there's the bolt as well, and then it looks like all that stuff just kind of comes off. Alright, so here it is again. Remember that those are left-handed threads, so you're going to have to righty-tighty. It took me a second, even though I just read the instructions. Right to loosen. Bolt is a 10 mil. The thing there, the Allen bolt for the guide is a 5 mil. And then here is the next step. And then what you'll have to do next is shout out to Pizza Hut, and then we'll go around to the other side and show you what. So you got to go back over to the other side here, and then there's this little circlip that is right, that goes on where your your shift lever goes. So there's just that little clip to go on there, and then there is a washer that sits behind there as well. That looks like that. My washer was pretty stuck on there, so just a little tap of a dead blow hammer, kind of just light little taps loosen that up. So yeah, there that is. So once you get that clip removed there, you just turn that motor over to the other side here and pull out the what do they call that? Shaft assembly. It looks like there's a little washer back in there that you got to remove too. But yeah, that's kind of cool. First time taking apart a transmission, so kind of learning here too. And I guess the other thing I will throw out there as a good tech, obviously you can do this in the bike if if your motor's still in there. Be careful you don't drop any little things back in there that you might need again. But if your motor's out, you're doing head work, you're doing anything like that. I picked up this. I think it's a washing machine pan. If your washer leaked. But this and some cardboard under it makes an awesome way to catch any oil as you're working on your motor. I bought this when I did the head for the first time. And once the pan's off, when you take the pick off, the thing's like a rock. I would, even if you're doing any sort of head work, degree cams, when the motor's out of the bike, the frustration level you'll save by removing the pan is second to none. It's definitely worth it. Unless you got a flat pan, of course. Then they sit nice and pretty flat, obviously. But without a pan, you're working on doing heads, cams, degree, anything like that. Definitely take the pan off. It will save you a lot of frustration on dealing with that stock pan with putting some 2x4s under there and whatnot. But yeah, definitely check that out. It looks like the last step here is to remove the bolts here around the transmission. There's a couple going around it. I had the socket around here somewhere that fits it. It is a T40. If you don't have one, you're gonna need one. Go buy one. So obviously there's a T40. I'll get these bolts removed, and then I'll show you what it looks like. And once you have all the bolts removed, again, it was the T40. Little impacts once you break it loose, or a walkie wrench. These things are pretty sweet too. But once you get all those off, you just kind of pull the transmission off. There you go, if you're curious what it looks like in there. And here's the transmission. Thanks for following along. Hopefully it helps, and I try and watch the comments as best I can, but if you got any comments, definitely let me know. Overall, it wasn't too bad of a deal. Probably the biggest pain in the butt, to be honest, was that screw for the gear position sensor. I don't know what they were thinking. That thing is just a nightmare. So if you can get in there with like a 90-degree screwdriver or something, I don't know. But that was probably, honestly, the hardest part of the whole job. Hopefully it helps. Thanks.